It's just been announced that America has bombed sites in Iran, and immediately my mind was like, "Oh, for crying out loud!" Now, there's a lot of people who will think, being British, what's that got to do with me? It's America. I can understand that. The reality is, the things that America do affects everybody around the world, and everyone is free to an opinion. And I get a bit fed up with that, where some people just want to silence other people. They try to marginalise. It's all about propaganda. Part of the problem for Brits is the fact that the British government, for the most part, for some stupid reason, always follow America into madness. The band of brothers, it's absolutely crazy. Especially when you've got an inept, corrupt leader. That's even more frightening. Who follows a bumbling idiot? So anyway, I've seen some of this Trump statement, and he always exaggerates everything. Everything's always grand with him. That's why you can't trust people like that. They're never just honest. Everything with him is huge. He's like, this is the biggest military act or something in decades. It's like, mate, there's always a freaking military act from America. There's no over exaggerating this one over anything else you've done. The real problem is, like, this isn't American people, because American people, for the most part, they don't want involvement in this shit. It's a corrupt government. And the problem is, the corrupt government becomes the face of the people. So it exposes people and makes them vulnerable around the world. So now, through one person's actions, or government's actions, it's now put the safety of Americans at risk now around the world. Because I see, like, I think it was Trump or someone was saying something about Iran would have limited capacity to attack America, especially America homeland. It's like, okay, but you've seen attacks on America's homeland. That's the real problem. Like, it might not come from a specific state. We've seen it throughout history, really. So they do get through. Now, I'm going to talk more on, because I've got a book I was writing anyway before all this. I've got multiple books in development. I've got my spiritual book. I've got a book on another book on personal growth. I've also got one on politics and society, and that's what I'm really going to delve into. So I'm not going to go too deep here. I'm going to unravel things a little bit more in that, because it's the more I can say and I can articulate. Because things you say, especially publicly, can be twisted and misconstrued to fit a state's narrative, if you like. So you need to be careful when you talk publicly. I think you use certain terms, use certain words. You have to try and stay away from them purposely, because that's the world we live in. It's absolutely unreal, isn't it? But I felt, to be honest, I'm not going to sit. This isn't like an in-depth video. This was more about me taking a stance and making it publicly known from the offset. So there's no ambiguity. It's not a case of, oh, they're being quiet on this topic now, they're being quiet on that topic now. It's like, I'd rather not talk about it at all. But I'm going to draw a line in the sand and say where I stand. I see it all the time, where all of these countries, no matter who they are, they always proclaim, with the grace of God, always like, oh, God, with God's, will. It's like, God doesn't will all this shit. You think God wants war? You think God wants everybody to destroy themselves? I've said it so many times. A lot of time, the heads of state do not conform to the will of the people. So think how many countries there are in the world. Of course, there's a lot. But think how many countries are at war, or they chose violence, or there's corruption. And think, okay, within the government, there's going to be certain people who have nefarious desires, just like the leader does. But for the most part, the leader is the one accountable. So considering the masses and how many people they represent around the world through the various countries, various heads of state, that's a lot of power for individuals to have. Just that on its own. And to say, with the grace of God, is actually maddening to me, because this world could be far more peaceful than it is now. And these constant escalations just cause more chaos than is necessary. The thing that people struggle with, I think, the majority of people, when I say that, I mean like the warmongers, the ones who like that power, a position of power. So a lot of Americans do. Not all Americans, but a lot of Americans love that. They love the fact that America has this huge military. They waffle on all the time. I see in comments of various videos, they always act like we're this, we're this muscle, we're this, nothing could beat us. It's like, this all becomes like war games. It's crazy. It's like playing Battleships, the game Battleships. There's no sense of reality to what that actually means. It's all this posturing and blustering. The reality is, America hasn't really been hit. on its mainland by a military force. They're so used to hitting other countries with very limited consequences. So there's this lack of reality to situations. There's this lack of reality to war. It's only when it happens on homeland that people finally realize how barbaric it is. But because they're relatively safe, they can have all these grand statements and grand feelings. And like people are fed up with it. Like around the world, people are just fed up with America's posturing all the time. The influence everywhere. It's like there's nothing to do with them, and it's always America's statement on this, America's statement on that, and it gets really frustrating because all you hear is Trump. Every time there's an incident around the world, Trump has to be the face of it. He can't just leave it alone and just get on with shit. He's a narcissist. He's a complete narcissist, and you'll notice it every time. Just keep that logged in your memory. Just that on its own. Every time there's an incident, you'll notice Trump's name attached to it. He can't go anywhere without trying to get credit for everything. It's crazy to me. So if you actually can have some empathy for people, and the only way you're going to gain that empathy is to think about what it would feel if your home was attacked in that way, like your country, your town, and everything you loved, everything you're familiar with gets destroyed. Now, in the Iran situation, it's very specific targets. We all know how this ends up expanding. You know, there's innocent people who are going about their daily lives just because there's corruption in one country and maybe the head is not a very nice person. That doesn't mean an entire race of people have bad intentions or they're nasty people. You know, that's just racism. It's just people just do this all the time, you know. And I can understand how unjust that is, that people's lives just get completely upheavaled because a state leader's gone mad and there's corruption. So again, sometimes when you talk publicly, you have to be so careful because it gets misconstrued. And there's so many governments out there that are corrupt. You know, you might think there's free speech, but there's always free speech to a point. Like early on, I always said this: I won't talk on the Israel-Palestinian situation because I weren't clued in enough. And I'm not even going to sit here and say I am experienced with it yet. There's still a book I should have read, and it's not a case of I'm trying to be ignorant. I've got a lot of books I should be reading. My book collection, I've got a lot of books. There's one called the Palestinian Laboratory, I think it's called. There was a journalist who I saw on the TV a couple of years ago, and he seemed educated. He talked affluent. It was easy to understand, and it made very good points. And straight away I thought, well, he's someone I could listen to. He's got a book. I'm going to buy his book. And I still need to read that book. But apart from that, and he made some good points. So my mind was already like, okay, I'm open. And then you just watch what's been happening with the genocide in Palestine. And you see the complete eradication of people, or at least the attempt of. You see entire homes demolished. And then you see sort of like the greed that Israelis have. There's a weird feeling about it all, like this entitlement, this feeling that they should always have, you know, and then you just look at the governments, the way they just kiss their ass, and it's like, this isn't normal. Why is it they could do whatever they want and they never get sanctioned in any way? They're always free to do anything they want, even if it's human rights abuses. And the longer it goes on, the more your eyes wake up. And that's where you see the corruption in governments. They're all siding with an absolute tyrant of a leader in Netanyahu. It's just crazy to me, and yet you can't say a damn thing because it looks like you're trying to be you're being cruel. It's like you're being cruel by raising awareness to it, and yet all these people are getting killed. Now there was something happened recently, and I noticed it. I didn't talk on it because I thought I'm not doing a video on everything, and I don't really want to get too involved. I'll do it in my books. There was an attack on a hospital in Israel, and I noticed straight away the propaganda that came out. And I'd seen videos a few days before, whether it was in Israel or not. I'm pretty sure, it showed anyway. And I just thought, yeah, well, this makes sense. Because for so long, we see reports of like hospitals getting attacked during times of war and conflict. You always think that's just cruel. Like, why would you attack, places that are trying to heal people who are not a threat? And then I see footage of these hospitals, but underneath the hospitals are military bases. So they're using people as fodder, human shields. So when a hospital got attacked in Israel, straight away I'm thinking the military is probably underneath that. And straight away, Netanyahu was coming out saying animals, they're attacking innocent people. But I'm thinking, you've been attacking innocent people for a very long time you don't care less about that. And you've probably, based on the way they behave, you can't say 100% there's a military base under there, but I would say of all probabilities, by the way he acts and the fact that he wants that propaganda, he wants that facility to get targeted, it's quite obvious because they use that moment to make grand statements, and then all of a sudden America join in. The corruption's outrageous, To add to that, the fact that a lot of Israelis are fleeing to Cyprus because it's the nearest island. And now there's a lot of locals, it's been reported, you only do your own research on this, and that's a great tourist destination for people around Europe. But there's reports that Israelis are buying up a lot of property in Cyprus. And I've seen some footage, videos where people are talking about that, saying that's how Israel starts. The Israelis start like that. They'll make it look, they'll just buy properties, it looks inconsequential. Over time, they start to insert sort of their propaganda, their rights, and then they'll end up taking over the island as an Israel nation. That's crazy, isn't it? And that's literally, if you think about it, that's what they did to create Israel in the first place. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they want their own island. So that seems maddening, doesn't it? But it's like they find a way. They find a way, don't they? And it's crazy to me. But the fact that, like I say, America have just attacked Iranian sites, that's a huge escalation, to be totally honest. Like, I think it's worrying for everyone because it should have been a de-escalation. Now not that it was safe to travel to Iran anyway. I've heard reports of people being detained and all sorts of, for being spies when they're just tourists. It's crazy to me. But now it's really unsafe. The whole region's going to be volatile, and there will be reprisals because, like, even if Iran don't officially attack, there will be people maybe sponsored by Iran doing things, and that makes people unsafe around the world. So, although it looks like America's posturing is strong, it's going to make them incredibly weak and vulnerable, and it exposes them. And now, if anything, to be honest, if you actually look at Trump and you look at what he's doing, he's been closing American borders to an extent because he's denying people entry. He's making people leave, even if they're on a tourist visa. It's been quite obvious Trump's trying to close American borders. He's trying to make it a very suppressive place where Americans don't have their freedoms. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is an instigation as a declaration of war without saying a declaration of war. And then because there's potential attacks on the homeland, he like incels and things, he might just start closing the borders further, and it gives him a chance to make it more of an authoritarian state anyway, on the precursor of this. There's all these little nuances. You only have to look at him and just see how it's going. His defense secretary, that Hegseth, he's just so incompetent. I always felt with this administration, though, they think they're coming in to be all powerful because they've all got this images of grandeur. But I always thought this was going to expose the inadequacies within the American politics, for starters, and the corruption around the world. And that's exactly what Trump's doing early on. And I felt that going in. So I always knew there'll be a blessing in the chaos because for too long, everything's been hidden. People have just added like a blindness to it, or they've not been aware. And I think now you can't ignore anything. It's literally in your face on every level. So it's churning it up. So when they keep saying, for the grace of God, I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking God's creating the opportunity for us to see the corruption in the world, to change it. And that means speaking up when we see something that's not right. Even if people don't want us talking about it. And people might say, it's not your business, or who you talk about that, or where are you getting your facts from? It's like, you do your research and I'll talk about mine. It's not for me to validate anything to anyone. So I couldn't care less if people think you shouldn't be talking about that. It's like, you don't get to police me. I honestly couldn't give a shit. So if someone wants to leave a negative comment, be spiteful, be this, but I don't have to respond to everything. I've already spoken in this video. So someone might think, oh, I've had the last word because you left a little sentence. It's like, I couldn't really, do I look like, I'm saying it now. Do I look like I give a shit? I'm just not going to keep responding to idiots because there's too many people that have been brainwashed. And like I say, I'm just sick and tired of the rest of the world getting dragged into shit. And I'm getting really, really, on the other side of that, I'm getting really fed up with the American government keep interfering with everybody else's lives, because I don't want to keep saying it's the American people, because it's not American people, is it? It's the American government who keep affecting the rest of the world. So this is none of their business, and yet they make it their business. And they do it in every region, in every country. There's an influence of America everywhere. And it's like, There's a completely different culture in those regions. Just leave those cultures to exist. You can blend, you can do trade. You don't have to have direct engagement in that sense. It's like that's for them to resolve. That's for those countries that reside in the Middle East who are neighboring countries. That's for them to decide amongst each other what the norms are, and the settlements. It's got absolutely nothing to do with other regions. In the same way, it's Europe is Europe. America is America. It's not for Europe to dictate what America should do. We can have opinions on things. And of course, America has such an influence around the world. That's why we have so many conversations about it. So people might think people are obsessed with America. It's no. It's rather not. It's just America's influence is everywhere. It's not about being obsessed to think about it. If Trump didn't get involved in all this shit and America just stayed contained within itself, do you genuinely think people would actually be that interested in American politics and what goes on? Because it's not affecting the rest of the world. But America affects freaking everything, all the way to the bloody moon. Every time there's an incident, there's always America's name attached to it. And that filters into these other, like even if there's rogue nations that just want heretic, they just want they want to cause division. They want to cause instability around the world. America's name being attached to it just plays into it, So if other countries say America is the enemy and then America go and do this, they're just playing into the doctrine that's already been playing out for decades, since forever. You're just playing into their hands. The same gets attached to the UK, England, because there's a British Empire. A lot of places despised Britain for it. The fact that they dominated the world for a period of time, and they still have an influence to this day. So those countries already have a negative opinion, and then when we go and we'll join in with attacks and do all sorts of things, it's just playing into their hands. Now they despise you for it because they see firsthand the military presence. Anyway, people might think, what's it got to do? Like I'm literally sitting here in the UK. It is sweltering in here. Like we don't, depending where you live, of course. Where I am, it's like when it's hot, a lot of the time there's no breeze at all. There's literally no wind. That's what I come from a seaside town, so like you used to get this coastal breeze, even if you weren't straight near the beach and things. It was nice. Where I've relocated to is more mainland, and there's no air, there's no breeze. It's like stagnant air. It's sweltering, and yeah, it's late early morning now, nearly 4 a.m. It's not the best time to be recording. I've got fans blowing at me. It's just blowing warm air at me at this point. If I was to leave the room and come back in, I'd say that's sweltering, but you get a bit more comfortable with it. But the reason I say that is I've got myself into this uncomfortable position just to record and talk on an issue, because I think it's important that we all speak up and share our opinions on issues, because if everyone just keeps staying silent and bury their head in the sand, then the world will sort of like determine our fate. Those around the world will determine our fate, and we'll literally have no voice, no power to do anything. And each one of us, the more we speak, the influence magnifies. So it's not about people agreeing with me. It's about people opening their mind and expressing themselves too. And I think it's about having empathy for people. It's really important. To go on a little bit further here, it's a video I was watching the other day because I bought it on Blu-ray. I showed it. I've seen it before, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I mean, in terms of the depth of it all, it's called An Idiot Abroad. It's really good. So this is completely. It's slightly derailed from the topic, but it's not. It's actually it comes full circle. So I was watching it, and Cole Pilkington is funny because he's someone that doesn't really enjoy traveling. You can tell. Things irritate him that other people would be fascinated by, So it's interesting as how, like, watching it. He's funny. He's funny without even meaning to be funny, which is quite cool. It's surreal. So when he moans, it's funny. So he went in the video, and I can't remember when it was recorded. I'm thinking it's about 10 years ago now, 15 years ago. I don't know. I can't remember exact years, So it's been a while. And he went to Israel. He's been around the world. So he went India, China. He's been everywhere, even Mexico, you name it. He went there. And in this episode I was watching the other day, 2 days ago actually, he was in Israel. And even he felt it was a bit surreal with all the guns in Israel, all the armed guards and things. And he was just going to this site where they apparently wail. They literally cry at this war. And it's part of their culture, religion or something. The Jews would go and cry at this war. And it was surreal. It was like, my God, this is weird. I thought it was weird, and I don't like to disrespect people, but that's a bit strange. And then they were putting pieces of paper like bills or something inside the wall. And I thought, this is just, I don't get it at all. So I can understand how he was baffled. And I think there was other religious people. It weren't just like Jewish people there, but it was only the Jewish doing that. Others maybe had like the Bible or something. They maybe doing prayer. I don't know exactly what was going on. All I knew of that part. But it was the fact they had all these armed forces just walking around with guns and things. It just made it a bit surreal. Like, how do you feel safe with that? You know, it's supposed to make you feel safe, but it seems really weird to have military on parade everywhere, or that's their police, but they look like military. I don't really know. Then they had, I don't know if I think that was the holy site in Israel. Then they showed him crossing over to Palestine. So it had to go past the wall, and the wall with this wall went across the entire, of course, the entire division, and it was ugly. It was ugly as hell. But the weird thing is, as soon as he crossed over into Palestine, although the complaints there were, we don't have access to everything, you know, it's a struggle. It looked like they were thriving in their own way, you know. On the other side of the wall, where they were, it actually looked nicer than Israel, from what I was seeing. Even though they were suppressed, it was like they were making it home. So they were settled more than the Israelis, from my point of view, from what I was seeing. And I think that's when they went to, I don't know if it was Nazareth. I can't remember if it's Jerusalem. I think if I've got it wrong, I've got it wrong. But I think Jerusalem might be in Israel, and Nazareth is it's Palestine, because there was a place. I might have it wrong. I don't know. I'm not going to stay to that. But yeah, they went to this site where supposedly Jesus was born, and people would go there and they take these flutes with them or something. But you're not allowed to use the flutes in there, because apparently when Jesus was born, people come bearing flutes. But anyway, it was really interesting to see that site. I found that really interesting. But the part I'm taking from that is, it looked nice. You know, they had, I think, if I got it right, I think they had like the beach, and they had this really nice esplanade thing, and it just looked really nice. Like, it just looked like any other place you'd go for holiday, for instance. And I thought, how beautiful. Like, it's nice. This looks nice to me. That'd be nice to visit if you didn't have this monstrosity of a wall and you didn't feel unsafe. You know, the conflict's crazy. And then you flash to now. Like, obviously, I've watched it a couple of days ago, but in my mind, I'm thinking, this is just disheartening. You saw you look, and people going about their daily lives. They're trying to survive, even though they've got this monstrosity of a war, which was restricting like their ability to get produce and things in, and it's literally at the mercy of the Israelis, which is crazy. And then you see now, and then you flash to now, where it's all demolished. It's all been bombed to crazy. You know, they've been obliterated. The whole entire people, their whole neighborhoods, their whole way of life has just been completely destroyed, because Israel wanted to claim the land as its own. And they just don't care about the lives of people. They know, to them, they're no more than vermin, you know? They literally, I see it all the time, and there's no point hiding from this, because I've seen it. I've seen video footage of it all the time. They do not care less, the Israelis, for the Palestinian people. They don't even have a value of their life. It's really degrading and disgusting. I saw vehicles where, if there's a Palestinian minibus, let's say it was a minibus, but it was maybe healthcare or something. It's up doing aid. They're not hurting anyone. They just park by the side of the street, and then a military vehicle or convoy might come through, and most of them they drive round. Some of them drive round. Some aim purposely and smash straight into them and cause damage, and then carry on. They literally do it. They go out of their way to cause so much destruction and ruin their lives. And sometimes they'll hit people. They'll drag them. They'll arrest them. They literally do whatever they want out of pure spite and anger, because they see them as they treat them like a dog, like even worse than a dog. And there's no hiding from that shit. You know, you can have all the propaganda in the world, but I've seen this with my own eyes. I've seen the footage of it multiple times. And again, I've never spoke too much on it, because I've been trying to analyze myself. You know, if you see that, but then what's it like on the other side? So you're trying to get a fair, unbiased opinion. But the more I see it, I'm just like, these people, they just don't care for any other culture, any religion, anyone above them, apart from themselves. And, you know, I think by nature, we all know that Jewish people are wealthy. You see it with World War II, for instance. And apparently they have a lot of money nowadays. And then they have a lot of, you think, so then the corruption just starts to make sense a bit more. You're thinking, these people just don't care about humanity in general. And they think they can buy them way out. Well, they think they can. They literally can buy themselves out of anything, and they can buy any influence they want. So it seems to me like they've bought American politics, by extension, British politics. Because if you can control America, you can control an awful lot of other nations. And I think they figured that out, to be totally honest. So then, who knows what goes on deeper into that? Unless you're there, you won't know the depth of it, is it? But if you just look, even if you don't even agree with that, it's like, you have to ask the question, why do everybody, like the big nations, like the Americans, and then by extension, Europe, the UK, why do they fall at the feet of Israel all the time? Why do they turn a blind eye to the humanitarian crisis? Because if it was happening anywhere else, there'd be outcries. Why is that permissible? That an entire race that existed before the Israelis can be eradicated and treated so inhumanely, and it be considered acceptable or tolerance. Anyway, so a lot of countries are on the wrong side of history right now. And I'm prepared to put my voice and attach it to what I consider righteous. So when I say America shouldn't be attacking Iran, that's not me saying Iran is in terms of their leadership is peaceful. It's just it's got nothing to do with America. That's for the countries around there, the Saudi Arabias, the Jordans. It's up to them to instigate peace, and it's up to all of those nations to come some sort of agreement amongst each other, and find a way. It's not for other nations that are further afield to affect that. It's not their region. And America just wants to be everywhere, it doesn't work. It's never worked throughout history. You've seen empires crumble. America's empire will eventually crumble. You never know, no country, no power stays dominant forever. Everybody has their time. So yeah, but personally, I don't want to say it, but it's when countries get attacked themselves on their own homeland is when you start to see a change in directive. Because that's real homes. That's real lives. And what people fail to reflect upon is that is what the US military is doing to other nations. They're destroying homes and they're destroying lives. And then you wonder why people in those lands, they don't like Americans, or they don't like British, or they don't like this nation, because it's attacked and stigmatized by the actions of the governments that oppose them and cause destruction in their homeland and in their towns. It's not hard to understand that, It's like, if you think about it, if someone invaded your country and you saw chaos in your towns, whoever did that is the enemy. So it just plays into the propaganda, and it's not fair for the innocent people to be stereotyped like that, I see it all the time, like, this nation hates these people, this nation hates these people. It's like, yeah, but all the people are the same. And just because a leader of a country does this doesn't mean it's the will of the people. I saw before the attacks on Iran, I saw reports that when I say reports, I've actually seen some congressmen actually saying these things, where they don't support an attack on Iran. And Trump needs to get a congressional approval. So he needs to do a vote before he declares a war. Then I saw some comments, and because I'm not sure the 100% of politics in America, some were saying he has 60 days where he can attack placed countries, but he cannot declare war. And if he wants to go to war, then he needs congressional approval. And I've felt for a while that Trump, he will overexert his authority somewhere. He will be held accountable, whether it's during his term or after. And all of his cronies that have done things on his behalf, thinking they're powerful, they're quite inept, and they will be held accountable after his term. So I always find it quite curious how they behave like they're invincible when they're only invincible potentially for a period of time, and you always get held accountable. So at the moment, all I keep hearing is it's because of Biden. There's no accountability for what they're doing. It's always this blame game, and I always find that quite disrespectful to a previous president. It's like, even if you didn't agree with their policies, as another administration, at least show respect to the ones that were there previously. Don't keep digging at them. That doesn't display strength. It displays weakness to me. It's like, take accountability, be direct, instigate what you feel is the right course of action, but stop blaming other people for it, So, like I say, I think that's what's going to happen. I think there's going to be accountability once Trump leaves office. Because the reality is, you can argue there's executive orders that, like, maybe where he creates pardons, but it seems to me that Trump's able to overturn a lot of shit anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised if the next person, whatever Trump tries to do to protect himself and others, I'm sure there'll be legal loopholes that they can be exploited, and the next president hopefully will hold him accountable. Because you can't have this where they could cause so much chaos. But yeah, but for someone that said he was trying to instigate peace before, like as he was coming into his term as president, he's now literally opened the doors to war in the Middle East. He's so naive because at the end of the day, although Russia have his handful in Ukraine, Russia and Pakistan are allies of Iran. I'm not sure if China is as well. I think they might be. So at the moment, you've got Israel and the US now at odds or war potentially with Iran. By extension, I wouldn't be surprised if the British follow suit, which I just think is absolutely outrageous because I'm pretty sure the majority of the British people don't agree. I don't see how you can do. British government is more likely to be diplomatic in the sense that they're less like it doesn't not happen, but they're more likely to go to Parliament and get diplomacy. So they actually make it so there's a vote. They don't always do that, but for the most part, they do, and I think that's the difference with Trump. Trump's more impulsive, but I do worry about keep following other nations into their battles. You don't have to join into every little thing. So I think you find yourself on the wrong side of history, personally. Yeah. Anyway, so this opens the door to all sorts now, and I mean, again, I'm not going to go too deep into the region because I think it's something I'll observe a little bit deeper, and like I say, that book won't be till next year or so anyway, because I've got other books. It's not my priority, but I find it quite interesting, to be totally honest, but not in a good way. It's like you'd rather not have these topics to talk about. I don't want to sit here discussing stuff. It's more about raising awareness, and then people can fact check themselves and they can do their research. But it's just to open your eyes to the world. It's not. It's like there's no point burying your head in the sand and hoping that you wake up and everything's great. Because by being ignorant, you put yourself in harm's way. Because if you're not aware of the politics, the geopolitics, the issues around the world, you would potentially find yourself in dangerous situations where you potentially thought you were safe, because the impact that the leaders of a country have on your safety is quite profound. Just because you have different values to what they're instigating, you're still the face of it, pretty much. So now actual Americans are not going to be safe in specific places now because of the actions of the president. That's crazy to me. But again, I think Trump's trying to close the borders anyway. I don't know why he's trying to do that. It's crazy because he's going to lose an awful lot in tourism. America has the World Cup, but there's no way if America's at a state of war at any point, I just don't see how you have the World Cup in America. You can't start denying entry to certain countries, for instance, because those countries have every right to take part. They've qualified. So I wouldn't be surprised if the World Cup gets taken away from America. That's something I'm interested in looking at. Now, some people won't really care about that, but the point is you can't have these events taking place in places that are not democratic. If it's an authoritarian state, I don't see how it works. But yeah, because I think now there's going to be an intense amount of insecurity and mistrust. So effectively, I think the American borders, you would assume, are going to tighten heavily now because they're going to be terrified of retaliations. So even though they act strong, you're going to find that there's a vulnerability, and they know it. Now there's talk that Iran may target shipping vessels. I don't know exactly what they call the strait. There's the passage where a lot of containers come through with the oil and things. There's a lot of trade that goes through. Is it Suez Canal? I can't remember the exact name. I might have got that wrong. Or military bases nearby and all sorts. But again, like I say, they have other actors who do things, and it makes it vulnerable around the world. So and that's the thing, The world deserves peace. That's the thing. That's what's bothering me more than anything. Is the world deserves peace. Cultures should blend. It should just be a nice place to exist. We should be able to travel around the world freely. And I say that, and yet all these wars are just making it impossible. And it just destabilizes all regions and continents rather than just confined to a country. Everything just keeps getting worse and worse, you know? And I keep getting, like I said at the beginning, I'm sick and tired of this for the grace of God. It's like, that's not God's will. God's will might be to expose the things that shouldn't be happening, so we instigate change, but the change will only come about if we actually talk about it. If people are more vocal, so stop hiding and actually express an opinion one way or another. I think that's just really important at this stage, which is why I've come out and spoken. Because I think it's important that we do, you know. But like I say, that bothered me a bit, that when I watched that Idiot Abroad, because although it's funny in stages, I mean, to have a sense of perspective, I think it really did show you know, he just showed the people just live. I wish I could show an example here. You can stereotype all you like and say these people, everyone's this, everyone's that. Everybody's unique. So everybody's going to have their own opinion, and I think that's really important. So I think that's what I try to do, provide balanced perspective here. But I think most people, I think, would say that just even from that footage, it's not right that entire sort of areas have just been decimated, and people were already suppressed before that. So effectively, they were contained, they were segregated, and then all of a sudden, you're getting pushed further and further back, and everything you love, everything you built is just getting ruined, and a lot of lives lost, you know? And I don't see how we can normalize that. And I just think when you hear leaders sort of try to validate attacks on other countries in the area, it's like, why would I trust them, or why would I agree with them when they've blindly allowed this to happen? So I think their inaction in that area is enough to recognize the corruption, in my opinion. So anything they say after that, for me, if you look at the propaganda, everything else, everything else after is only ever going to fill the narrative of what that country wants to dictate. So, for instance, if you want Iran to be the monster in the room, all the propaganda is going to point towards issues there. But when do they ever highlight the issues in Israel? That's where you sort of notice it. And like I said, Israelis are fleeing Israel because they're all self-serving. You know, it's just they don't care about anything. But I don't like stereotyping, and it's not right to do so. But I think the fact that they're fleeing to Cyprus and now trying to invade Cyprus and make that their homeland is a bit worrying. Now, it's a big statement to make. We'll see how that unfolds. But I wouldn't be surprised. From my understanding of Cyprus, if I could have it wrong, but I think it is, half of the territory is Greek and half the territory is Turkish. So I find that curious. What side are they trying to take over? Because one would assume, based on the region, that the eastern side, the closest side to Israel, would be Turkey, because Turkey's closer that side. And then you would argue the west side, you would assume, is Greek, because Greece is to the west. So that means they'd be like invading Turkey, this Turkish side. And I'm not sure what Turkish government have over that, but that'd be really interesting, because I don't think Turkey is an ally of Israel. I don't know. I don't know the politics of all that. But anyway, that's going to be an interesting aside to it all. Like I said, this isn't about me just trying to be all factual and stuff, because people can point out flaws in all sorts of things. I'm still learning just like everybody else, but I do recognize corruption when I see it. And I do absolutely recognize when a can of worms has been opened. So Trump has potentially, and when I say potentially, it's just from what I've read in the news a little bit there, is so you go on Sky News, for instance, in the UK, you'll see it, and I'm sure it's been broadcast everywhere else, that Trump has attacked the nuclear sites, and now he's saying enough. It's now time to end this and bring about and be peaceful. But it's very naive, and it's saying that he may miscalculate, and he's banking on this not escalating. So he just wants to be the one that instigates all the positive. He wants to be like, everybody applaud him, but it could be the instigation of the next phase of battles, really. Because, not being funny, you attack a country, it's going to be very unlikely they're going to go, you know what, You've destroyed all of this, which cost fortunes to make. You've cost lives. You've cost us a huge setback. And you expect us just to say, oh, you know what? You got us. It's very unlikely. It's very unlikely. And the reality is that someone could say, oh, everything's fine. Meanwhile, they're doing underhanded shit behind closed doors anyway. They may end up funding militants and all sorts of stuff. And then there'll be minor skirmishes and minor attacks without being attaching their name. That happens, doesn't it? So even if they say all is well, there's going to be a huge amount of resentment and hate towards America now in the Middle East. And I think America just does it time and time. They never learn the lessons. The American government never learns I'd say the American government doesn't learn lessons, but from what the noise that was coming out of Congress when I heard certain congressmen and women, they were pointing towards the fact they don't support a war with Iran. It's none of our business. It's not for us to get involved in that. So I wouldn't argue American government as such, because if you look at the branches of government, some are actually reluctant to get involved because they can understand the consequences. Whereas, like I've said in another video, I consider Trump like a 5-year-old with temper tantrum, with very low intelligence, and he just wants to be this martyr. It makes him incredibly dangerous. So, yeah, I don't think he thinks everything through. He does things on impulse, and it's quite. It has huge ramifications, not just on Americans, but everybody else around the world. And this conflict's going to get. I think it's going to expand. It's going to escalate, and then other countries will have to. This is what effectively is happening here now, in my opinion. Is countries are going to struggle to sit neutral. The ones that have maybe tried to not get involved are now going to have to state whether they approve of that attack on Iran or whether they disapprove of it, and that's going to affect their stance with allies. Who are they allied with? So that's going to be really interesting, because you're going to find division around the world, I think. But anyway, I only did this video just to raise awareness, really, and just show my hand, because I think it's important for accountability.